I've just spent the last half an hour straightening up these pieces of timber. I've adjusted the height a little bit on the stones, down a bit there, up a bit here, or down here, up there. I've made sure that all of these standing posts are in plumb, using my trusty meridian lines. Plumb that way, plumb that way. I've done that with all four. They're all standing really perfectly now, completely vertical, and they're all at the right height. At least those two long horizontals there are at the right height. And if there's a tiny little discrepancy on this one, it's because it needs to come down about a centimetre here onto its points. I'll have to cut through a bit. It needs a bit of weight on it. I've done the joinery a bit too tight really. I've done that because I think it's going to shrink. But I do realise, and I've seen on some of the drawings now, on some of the photographs that I've seen of older Grindbygg in different places in Norway, that there's often something here to wedge this piece of timber against that. So I'm thinking a little bit about perhaps putting a wedge of some kind into the timber, but I don't really want to do that because it will weaken this piece to have any more holes in it. And that's quite well trapped there as it is. I'll think a bit more about it. I might put a peg in, I might put an ashwood peg and then bang a wedge in between. If I put a peg right up against the other piece, that top plate, and then bang a wedge in, maybe that's good enough. I like the idea perhaps that you can tighten them as they shrink. I've got an idea that was a thing, but that's just supposition really, although there does seem to be evidence that there was some kind of wedge system going on. That would also account for why in the film of the old guys doing this in the 1960s they were doing such loose joinery. I mean, it was really, really gappy work, and they weren't doing a bad job, but it was to do with the speed of production, I think. This has been slow to produce. But I'm ready for that piece of wood. Yeah, the piece there right in the middle that's got the smallest dimension. That was one of the legs of the crane. I think that's just long enough to use as a ridge beam. I'm quite keen to use a ridge beam because I'm not sure that my rafters are long enough. Okay, I can check the accuracy of the work in such places as this, where I have my central line there still. If I've got the timber down into the right position, then that should be vertical. This should be vertical. Pretty close. I can see that that one's tipping too far in. It should be at least go a couple of degrees that way. So maybe the wedge idea is a good thing. If I put a wedge at the bottom or at the top, I can perhaps adjust a little bit how deep that goes in. Actually, I can see that is tight against the woodwork there. So there's no way I can make that go in further without cutting a bit out here. But I don't think I want to mess around too much with the woodwork. I think I want to let a little bit of inaccuracy go, because these are all actually adjustment points that can be done at any time. I can come back in 2 years' time and adjust that with that little rat tail saw, and if I use a wedge there and a rat tail saw, I can adjust every single piece of work that I've done there. Every single joint can be redone. It goes down slightly lower. It's all available as far as I can think. So I think I'm going to put that ridge beam up on a couple of little standing posts, but of course I'm not quite sure how high they should be. I'll put a little post in the top here and have the ridge beam on top of it, and then my spaddered, my rafters can go on that. I mean, remember they're already cut, those rafters, so it shouldn't take very long to put them up once I get going. But I don't like the way that the scaffolding is at all, so that's a big fail. I put this scaffolding up here and it's been useless because it's too far away, and I put some scaffolding down there. They've just ended up as being platforms, you know, for reel, they're called in Norwegian, you know, where you put your materials, storage. And I wasn't happy working on that system there, ladder with planks on it. That was both too weak, and I didn't like being higher up than the work surface, so that's all interesting. Anyway, let's get back to the actual question in hand. Now that all these posts are set up vertically, I can make the wind braces. The wind brace is going to be straight. It's just those ones there that are going to be root. One's right in the middle of the screen now. They're the only ones that are going to be knees. The rest are going to be just straight braces with dovetails, like you might have already seen on other Grindbygg. It's like the normal way of doing it. Although this is also, I have seen photographs of buildings with those knees in as well. It's to do with making better height. You get more height. Well, we seem to have a change in the direction of the weather. So we have a kind of southwesterly breeze now, which is quite good because the noise from the road building is not going to be as prevalent today. I want to try and put up the rafters today. I wasn't quite sure if I was going to try and put up the ridge beam first to put them on, but I'm really not sure of. Although I've got it all on paper worked out, supposedly, I'm not confident that it's correct. So I had an idea of how I could do it in a very practical way, which is quite good to illustrate in a way because it shows a really practical way of doing it where you don't really need to do any you don't have to do any Pythagorean equations or anything like that. It is really good to plan it, but it's quite a specialised thing doing that, and not everybody wants to do it. So I don't know. I don't think it's really necessarily any to do it in a practical way as it is to work it out and do it in a theoretical way first, because it does take quite a long time to sit down and think very carefully, and you have to also think about every possible eventuality, which is really difficult just from a thought. And I think really you only have any chance of having a success doing it like that if you really already kind of have some experience and know whether it works or not in practice, and by making loads of mistakes and redoing them, you know, because there aren't just single points here, so using single point mathematics is a bit difficult really. You have to kind of choose where your single point is. And I've tried to do that by choosing the intersection of my two red lines, which is that particular point there. It is one singular point. I can see that really easily now that the building's here, but could I see it in the workshop with my drawing board? I mean, I might have been able to, but I'm not confident that that's true. So this is I'm going to just show this really practical way of doing it, which I kind of thought that would be possible to do. So let's just see if it's really true. I've got these nice thin boards here, which I'm going to just screw on to one side of the. Well, I don't need to describe it in words. You're going to see it now. I've only got a couple of screws, so let's hope this works. I don't really need my headphones just now, but I like to have them handy because it's no hassle having them there on the top there. If any of you wonder why I'm wearing what looks like a riding helmet, it's because it is actually a crash hat. It's a very inexpensive one from Biltema. So not everything from Biltema is bad. I think it was the price of 2 loaves of bread. I don't know, there's no point telling you how much it was in crowns. Whatever it was they weren't doing a minute ago, they've started doing again now because it's pretty noisy out there. There's a little bit of wind today coming up the valley. Otherwise, there's a Lovely day. Quite good doing things like that. Quite hard. Fall down now, but I think I'm still able to adjust the height. I think. Way. It's a bit tight. That's definitely a bit too tight here. You can see it's a little bit tight there. I'm just going to give it a little go with this. In my mind's eye I was expecting just to do the adjustment on this piece, but because I haven't built a proper scaffolding, it's not that simple. And I don't think it's worth, the reason why I haven't built a scaffolding properly is because there's so little to do up here. It would be a day spent. So it is, in a way it's not very good to work from a ladder, but I'm not very high up the ladder. I'm less than 2 metres off the ground, so for the safety people. So both of the pieces, both of the rafters have a gap going down into the socket there, which means that at the moment the roof angle is too steep a pitch. I mean, I could just cut them down until they were the right level. I could use my angle iron and my rafter. What's that in English? Oh, it's so difficult translating into English all the time. I have all of these terms in my head in Norwegian. You know that I am English, but I've lived here for a long time, and all of these building terms I've learnt in Norway, not in England really. So most of the English expressions that I'm using I've learnt from you subscribers who've written in comments and helped to remind me of the names of everything in English. I mean, I do look in the English books, but I don't remember it. I don't retain the information because it's not in practical use every day. I only use it when I'm making these films, because all of the other work I do is with Norwegians, and I don't ever speak English with Norwegians really, apart from my children. Alright, rambling. I've had probably too much coffee today, talking again. Right, I thought of a way of doing this, which I don't know if I just described already. I put a line nice and tight between the centre points. It should be, yeah, it's very, very, very close. As far as I can tell from here, that is in, be super careful with the angle not to change it. I've tightened it up nice and tight so it shouldn't change. I'm going to bring the one of these down to the correct height, which I'm going to use the angle and the spirit level to find out. I put my angle against my spirit level, put the angle on the top of the wood, and lower it down to the right height, which is there. So it doesn't really matter if the piece of wood is, it doesn't matter if it's too low. I mean, it doesn't matter if it needs to go down further into the wall, it's still going to go down at this angle, so it's parallel, so I don't have to worry too much about that. The height I can decide later. Just get a nail started there. Right, now I've got two hands. And because this is good that this is magnetic, because I don't have to, it's not so easy to drop that. I'll put this on the top. I'll go down until I get my plumb line. Let's try that again. I have that's perfectly in plumb now, in the right level there. So, well, you know, within give or take a degree, maybe half a degree. And I put my middle line string up here. So all I need to do is get another plumb line here, get that perfectly in plumb, line it up with the red line, make sure it's not touching. It shouldn't touch the red line, it just has to be the pencil width away from the line. from the red line, you know, my string here. This is where it's nice being two, because someone else could tell you when it was correct. There we go. So that one is long enough to cut it straight off. So now I have a plumb line there, and that should be the same as that. Yeah, and it is. It's my measuring tool gives exactly the same angle. So I could cut that beam at that height. It's 122.5. Yeah. Well, that's certainly a way of doing it. And if it needs to go down, as long as it needs to go down around about the same amount on both sides, then I'm actually sitting pretty there. I can do them both. I can use the length along the top edge because that is definitely alike. So I can do the rest on the ground. And because they've got space to meet in the middle, if I put a beam underneath them, then well, I don't even probably need that. But I don't really like just to have flat against the flat. I don't think that's strong enough, really. I like to lap them over each other, and I just don't have. They're not long enough to do that. I could do it a little bit, but I don't think there's a. No, I don't think it's necessary. I'm just going to cut them like that, and then I'll cut them all like that at that length, because I'm pretty sure that is correct. And then I'll use a ridge beam, which I can actually put in after they're all done. Just by jacking it up a little bit. Now that I've got all of those numbers there and that height and everything, I mean, it would be quite interesting to go back to the drawing board and just see. So that builds 1 metre 30. A little bit under 1 metre 30. But you see, this line here is much lower than the line of the triangle, so it's not that easy to do anyway. However you do it, it's not very easy, really. But what I'm demonstrating in this film is a kind of trying to solve a problem in different ways. Like another way of doing this would have been to put up temporary woodwork on the gables, like I think that's how I did it on one of the other films that I've got of doing the garage a couple of years ago. You know, it's all pretty tricky. I don't have a great deal of experience of setting up these heavy timber roof constructions. It's quite a long way away from doing what we call årstak, which I've had to have done quite a lot and can do quite confidently. But it's always the same with roof constructions. They're very unforgiving. You have to be very careful, and it's so easy to make a mistake. It's just as well to do it slowly, carefully.